I think we'll get going. So it's a couple of minutes past 1. And most people have probably joined us with their lunches. Okay, so as you can see, I'm recording the webinar. So I'll make sure that you all get a copy of it afterwards. But yeah, let me just do a very quick introduction. Welcome everybody to this webinar, and it's on fostering greater impact through alliance building and collaboration. My name is Louise Peterson. I'm the Executive Director of the Outdoor Recreation Council, and we are hosting this webinar today. It's part of our monthly webinar series. The Outdoor Recreation Council is a nonprofit society of organizational members anywhere. Like some of our members are, Shuswap Trail Alliance, Prince George ATV Club. It's provincial organizations, it's regional organizations, local organizations. We are the only provincial organization in BC that represents all the main outdoor recreation user groups. We voice the interests and concerns of the organized recreation sector to government. We advocate for access and funding, and we build capacity within the sector through webinars like this and other types of events and resources. And as always, I'm not wasting any chances to kind of make sure that you know that you are welcome to join us or to apply for membership. Memberships are it's not very expensive, like 192 for provincial organizations and 96 for regional organizations. That also includes local organizations. Because it is membership fees and donations that help us put on webinars such as these. So with trails and outdoor recreation becoming ever more popular, recreation groups around the province are recognizing the benefits of collaborating with local groups that have got similar interests to help influence decision making, engage in joint planning, and tackle the maintenance of recreation infrastructure. We get quite a few requests all the time. People really, having an interest in knowing more about, what they can do to, just some of the best practices to, bond together with other organizations. So I thought, there's really no better way to share about this than bring some of our friends into, this virtual studio. So I have brought, there are many trail and recreation alliances out there, quite a few within our own membership, but I've invited four organizations to talk to you all today. So I've invited Jen Bellhouse, who's the Executive Director of the Shuswap Trail Alliance, Terese Finegan, Director of Economic Development and Tourism with the District of Tumbler Ridge, and also she's with the Tumbler Ridge Outdoor Recreation Society, and I'm really looking forward to learning more because it's a brand new society. Also invited Lance Anderson, the President of the Tabor Mountain Recreation Society in Prince George, and Melanie Wrigglesworth, the Executive Director of the Fernie Trails Alliance. So I have told all four that I'll give them no more than 5 minutes to just do a brief introduction to who they are and the organization that they are with, and maybe talk a little bit about how they got started. And then after that, I've got some additional questions that I'll ask our 4 panelists. So I think we should get started, and just let you know that we are taking questions afterwards. So feel free to just enter your questions at any time into the Q&A box, and yeah, we'll make sure that we have at least 10 or 15 minutes at the end. So Jen, do you want to go first? And actually, so I'll just close down my presentation here so that you can, if you've got some slides, you are welcome to share those.
Yep. One sec here with technology because it's not cooperating, of course. Sorry, Louise, my PowerPoint's disappeared, even though it was open and right here.
Do you want a few moments more? Do you want to wait a little bit and then?
Here we go.
Okay.
I love it as many times as you practice it. Do you see the full slide now? Okay, thanks, Louise. I am Jen Bellhouse, the Executive Director of the Shuswap Trail Alliance. White, hello. I would just like to acknowledge that the Shuswap Trail Alliance is privileged to operate within the traditional unceded territory of the Shuswap people. So how did the Shuswap Trail Alliance come to be? 18 plus years ago, there was a lot of isolated local priorities within the Shuswap region. The City of Salmon Arm, the Columbia Shuswap Regional District, the Salmon Arm Economic Development, the multiple chambers, we're all looking for new and exciting tourism opportunities, recognizing that within the Shuswap, we have a bunch of smaller communities. We were never going to have a giant coliseum or a big museum or traditional infrastructure to draw people to the region. So folks started looking at country, land-based front and back country opportunities, and that included trails. Communities wanted trails. There was a lot of development within the region, which was obliterating social trails that had been used for years. The Secwepemc communities were concerned about the landscape and the lack of managed recreation, and there was a growing concern and need for safe connection between the communities. In 2002, Shuswap Tourism conducted an opportunity strategy, and trails were identified as a priority for the region, along with the need to have champions to push the project or trails forward, and a need to work together. And so it was recognized that priorities wouldn't move forward unless we found a way to work together as a region, opposed to individual communities within the region. It was determined that we needed a collaborative, big picture idea or organization or group to push this forward, and more accountable relationships were needed between the communities, including Secwepemc leadership. An area director identified, a Columbia Shuswap Regional District area director identified that residents were feeling disconnected from the land base. There was little access to the lakes, very few parks. And this led to CSRD putting their first parks planning on. So fast forward another year or two, and there was some roundtable discussions, and folks really started asking, well, what if we did work together? It was recognized that whatever it was, it had to be done comprehensively with a community development model. It needed to be more accountable and more resilient. It had to be able to provide quick wins as well as long-term successes. So it was determined right from the start that this had to be something that was going to be able to continue on for years into the future. For us in the Shuswap, the Community Futures Shuswap played a huge key into the initial discussions. They came up with some seed funding, and sessions were held throughout the Shuswap. There was an opportunity for relationships to be developed between key leadership in the different regions within the Shuswap. And so then it was kind of, okay, we've got this thing, what do we do next? At the time, they approached the MLA, and it was indicated that it looked like it would need to be an organization, and that this organization, in order to be successful, would need to have provincial and regional government buy-in. There was some Olympic priorities and planning going into place. So now we're talking 2008, 2009, and Legacy Now funds became available. But it was made super clear, in order to access the funds, we had to demonstrate that there was clear collaboration, and it was no one region one community or organization working on their own for a one-off project. So that brought us the Shuswap Trail Alliance, which is the organizational body through which local, regional leadership work together to develop and implement the Shuswap Trail strategy. We work together as First Nations, stewardship, government, industry, business, and community stewardship organizations and individuals. The Shuswap Trail vision is to establish the entire Shuswap watershed as a united destination trail center known for its active lifestyle, vibrant culture, natural beauty, and commitment to sustainable ecology. This includes well-designed, well-signed, well-maintained, and well-promoted trails. Our approach is to use a participatory relationship-based community development model. A lot of big fancy words for we work together. A few of the key values that we have kind of come to agree on over the years are reverence, humility, respect, balance, knowing when it might be enough, gratitude, and yukwetsu, or stewardship, taking care of the land. So prior to the Shuswap Trail Alliance, these were the amount of trails you could get to within a half-hour drive from Salmon Arm. Fast forward to 2022, and these are the trailheads that we have within the Shuswap region today. So how are we funded? In 2022, our total project funding was almost $868,000. We received operational funding from the City of Salmon Arm, the Columbia Shuswap Regional District, the City of Enderby, District of Sicamous, Village of Chase, all at different sliding scales dependent on the size of the organization. We now have 4 part-time staff, 3 permanent full-time staff, some project-specific staff, and a field crew, annual field crew of anywhere from 4 to 10. And that is my 5 minutes. Thank you.
That's great, Jen. Thanks for the speed talk. Moving on to, let's hear from Tumbler Ridge, Outdoor Recreation Society.
Thank you, Louise. Can you see my screen? Oh,
nope.
No? Oh, there we go.
Not just slides. Yeah.
Okay. Can you see that now?
Perfect.
Fantastic. Good. So technology does work when it wants to. So thank you very much for having me on here today. I'm Terese Finegan, the Economic Director of Economic Development and Tourism in Tumbler Ridge. I've been here in the role since January last year, having transplanted from Australia, and prior to that South Africa, and prior to that Zimbabwe. So just that little segue, so the accent of it doesn't sound from one country, it's a bit of a hybrid. So the Tumbler Ridge Outdoor Recreation Association, as Louise said, is extremely new and only came into being at the end of last year. So let me see if I can get onto my next slide. Slide control, there we go. There we go. So that's, well, bounce past that. So last, I think it was April, May, 2 members of the community from one of our 4 big user groups came through to see myself and Jessie, who's in the team with me here at the district, and had this idea. They'd been following Valemont, Revelstoke, and quite a number of other communities out there who were blazing the trail with these alliances and a collaborative way of thinking. So in Tumbler Ridge, we have 4 main big user groups, which we sort of term the big 4. So they're the Wolverine Nordic and Mountain Society, which takes care of all the non-motorized sports. So snowshoeing, hiking, walking. If you're familiar with the Emperor's Challenge, which is a half marathon held here in August of every year, then that is one of the events that the Wolverine Nordic Mountain Society started many years ago and continues to run. We also had the Tumbler Ridge Mountain Bike Association, who are extremely active, a relatively new association, but been highly successful with the building 2 years ago of the pump track here in Tumbler Ridge, which was a massive effort, and I think one of the few in the region. Then the other club is the ATV Club, the Grizzly Valley Club, and the Ridge Riders, which is the Snowmobile Association. So basically 2 of these associations came to the table and wanted to talk about collaborating. So I immediately thought it was a fantastic idea. As Jean said, we're always better together. So I went through our work plan. It met a lot of our priorities here in our ECDev strategy, notably with tourism leadership. And we actually then got together with all of those 4 at the table and sort of put this graphic together about who else would be involved with us. So the thing to note about Tumbler Ridge, and the minute I arrived here, I was just really taken aback by how much had been done by the community and how much of it was all volunteer-led. They had been bootstrapping for years. All of our trails, all of the clubs have just been run by volunteers. There's been no paid staff amongst any of them except for the odd occasion here and there, there'd be a resource that they'd be able to get their hands on. But ultimately, our tourism product here has been built by volunteers, which I find just amazing. So alongside with the big 4, I think with this model, we've taken the big 4 and elevated them up sort of on top of, even above, like the district, the geopark, other community groups, the community forest. You'll see in that graphic there that we sat down and worked out who all would be involved at some stage as stakeholders in this association. And some of the problems we were trying to solve that met some of my criteria, which is why the district became involved in the first place, is obviously over tourism post-COVID and during COVID became very much talked about. We noticed that there were lots of overlaps and gaps. So with our volunteer base, it's very likely that one volunteer on one of those big four works as a board member in another club, obviously across the seasons. And we were, of course, getting volunteer burnout, and everybody was competing for the same kind of funding, trying to get space at the table, and doing fantastically well, all things considered. But we just felt it was a good time to consolidate. So the solution for us was to create the association. We went out for funding. We thank you very much to Tumbler Community Forest, who were our first donor at the table. Who put a big chunk of money down, as did Kanuma Resources, our main employer here in the region. And then we took that money and multiplied that through the South Peace Mackenzie Trust, which was another source of available funds. All of that is going to allow us to take on one full-time employee, so create a new position, obviously outside of the district, for one FTE. This is going to help us coordinate and create more alignment, and it's going to bring together the community and commercial interests to facilitate sustainable development of the recreation economy. So where we are right now is the society, as I said, formed, well, first conversations were in April last year. And in our region, it's the little town that can. Everybody got together. We formed the society. We have a board of 7. We've actually just gone out to look for another community member, and the board are meeting on Thursday to decide that. And that's really like the summer where we are. I think unlike other communities, we kind of got out the gates and just sprinted for the middle of the track, and now we're going to figure out how we're going to do it, and put a recreation or an outdoor recreation plan together and start pulling in stakeholders and steady our feet and see where we go. And that's me.
That's awesome. Thank you. Lance, do you want to go next?
Okay, I'm going to go through a bit of a history lesson around Tabor Mountain first. So recreation on Tabor Mountain and the surrounding area has been going on since the development of Prince George. Prior to the 50s, of course, activities including backhorse trails and other outdoor outings were on Tabor Mountain. In the 50s and 60s, the major focus was for forest management activities, which created a lot of road or service roads, industrial service roads in the area, which allowed even more recreation availability on the mountain. In August of 1961, we had 2 huge fires on Tabor Mountain, one in the Grove, the other one, I think it's pronounced Tussis. And that consumed just over 35,000 hectares, just about the whole mountain. So, of course, the resource roads, fire guards, and everything else created a huge network of open trails, resulting in improved access to the area and growth of recreation within Tabor Mountain. Recreation activities grew with strategies to be established. Tabor Mountain as an area focused on recreation, which the BC government of the day would not formally recognize. During the 60s and through the 70s, ski enthusiasts, that's mostly Sons of Norway and Hickory, which was formed in 1957, and the Hickory Wing Ski Club in 1959. They did a lot of development of trails and cabins throughout the mountain. In 1972, Tabor Grove Recreation Committee was formed to establish some continuity within the mountain. The committee asked as a coordinator. The committees act as a coordinating body for recreation users, but volunteers, of course, at that time was an issue. It was a young town. A lot of people were still working and didn't have a lot of time to volunteer. But the Sons of Norway clubs and friends undertook most of the trail work after that. In 1975, the Sons of Norway started to build warming cabins there. The first one of used to be 5, according to the history, but there's only 3 left up there now. And part of the plan was to start building snowmobile trails. Well, that all went along, and then in 2006, a conflict was brought to the attention of the government, now Rec Sites and Trails BC. The matter was taken seriously by the government, and they provided a solution, which was the ultimate goal, become to have all the existing recreation groups using the mountain to become part of an umbrella society, which will ensure everyone can practice their recreation activities in a harmonious way and will allow for better integration of the planning, future maintenance work to be formed in the public designated trails by government. The Tabor Mountain Rec Society, TMRS, was created in 2008, and that was due to the fact that a lot of clubs there was 13 clubs, I believe, at the time, were part of TMRS, or using the mountain, and they were going to Rec Sites and Trails BC individually with their issues. And the officer of Rec Sites and Trails at the time said, "I'm not dealing with 13 clubs, it'll drive me nuts." So that's why the umbrella company, to basically take everybody's grievances, what we couldn't work out or what TMRS could not work out, we would take to Rec Sites and Trails BC. But basically, it's worked very well since then. There's been a few issues. I know that we've gone to a lot of the clubs and have asked the clubs to respect other clubs. And when I'm saying that, if you take an example, cross-country skiing, it's all virgin snow that the cross-country skiers are skiing on. Well, if you run over that trail with a snow machine, you basically destroy that trail. So they've talked to all the clubs about respect for the other clubs. Of course, we can't talk to all the population of British Columbia, so there is still a few issues. But on the whole, as the clubs that are registered within TMRS, there's a lot of respect between the clubs, both for multi-use trails and individual trails. So I know that the motorized sports, we do a lot of ATVing and snowmobiling on the mountain. And if you come across somebody that is hiking or a horseback or bicycle or anything like that, motorized stops allows the other users to go by and then carry on your way, trying to reduce any conflict that could be between the groups. So since 2011, we've basically just carried on with improving trails, keeping our trails up to date, safe, trails to ride, walk, or do your recreation sport. In the last year, we have had Association of Caledonia Trail Builders come on board with TMRS, and well, actually 5 years ago. But in the last year, they've started building a lot of mountain bike trails on the mountain. So when they're done, we're going to have probably somewhere around 50 kilometers of mountain bike trails, as well as the other 407 kilometers of trails that we do have on the mountain for multi-use. So, and up to today, it's basically just keeping all those trails in good shape. We've put, TMRS has put in, I think it's 8 or 9 bridges on all the trails out there, gone from log poles across the creek to an actual bridge. So, and we just carry on.
Wow, Lance, that's such a powerful story about how, you know, yeah, getting together, you can resolve a lot of conflict and making it easier for land managers such as Recreation Sites and Trails BC. Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Lance. Melanie, can you make it short? No. Thanks.
Yeah, of course I can. I'll just share my screen real quick and
You got 5 minutes. Don't worry.
I know I won't. Most of you guys have touched already on all of the things about creating, how important it is to create an alliance. So my name is Melanie Wrigglesworth. I'm with the Fernie Trail Alliance. I'm very new to this role, so I wasn't around like some of you have been right from the beginning of your alliance creation. But the stories have been told to me that back in 2008, we were running into the same issues as Lance was for Tabor Mountain. It was just many user groups approaching different landowners for the same things. And so we all sat at the table and came up with the Fernie Trails Alliance. And I think one of the most powerful things about our organization is that we all work together, and it makes it streamlined and much more efficient to collaborate. And we're not competing for funds, and we're not overlapping on projects because we're just one voice going to the different landowners. So again, we are very thankful and grateful that we are able to gather on the land that is the Akamis and the Tanaha. And we are very grateful for the use of the trails and appreciate this homeland very much. Our mission and values, like we develop and maintain and enhance the human powered trail network in Fernie. So we don't have the same non-motorized woes as some of the other trail organizations. So we're lucky with that. Our vision is to establish a fun, robust, and diverse world-class trail experience that will endure for generations. And our values are integrity, accountability, community, collaboration and partnership, environmental responsibility, and respect and positivity. One of the things that I think is sort of a trigger word that for a lot of the other clubs when you're creating an alliance, for those of you that are doing it, is don't use the word umbrella. I find that a lot of the organizations find that very triggering. So we sort of came up with the term member clubs. So the Fernie Trails and Ski Touring Club, the Fernie Mountain Bike Club, and Stag Leap Run Club are the three different organizations that are member clubs, and we work collaboratively and together in the Valley. And then we also have supporter clubs at Fernie Nordic Society, as well as Cycling Without Age. So we work with all of these organizations to make a very diverse trail network. In Fernie, it's a little bit different. We're not just dealing with Crown, like Recs and Sites BC or parks. We have 14 different land use agreements with different private landowners. And this is one of the strengths of our organization, is that we do yearly reports and planning reports to all of these landowners. And it's a very efficient way to get work completed, to ask for funding, and to work collaboratively. We also work very closely with the City of Fernie. We're one of their community partners, as well as Tourism Fernie, for building a very robust and strong network, and as well to work on a very active transportation plan. This is new this year for us to have an executive director. We've had a trail maintenance manager, Ben, for the last 3 years, and he's amazing. And we've been lucky to have a wage subsidy grant during COVID to have an actual trail crew out on our trails. They manage over 440 kilometers of trails in our valley. But we also could not have done what we've done without the hours and hours of volunteers that spent the time creating this organization that I'm lucky to now lead. So we have 10 different committees within our board that are actively involved. We meet weekly, monthly as a board, but our committees also meet sometimes bi-weekly, especially our Trails and Maintenance Committee, who give us direction on what we're going to do on the trails, what project we're undertaking, and planning for the strategic planning for the future. So there's sort of a map of our trail network. Want to talk a little bit about our successes and accomplishments in the last year. We were able to start a winter grooming initiative with the Tourism Fernie and Coal Creek Heritage Society to manage the 762 kilometers of sled grooming that we completed last year and this year. So we're starting to become not only a summer destination, but a winter destination for fat biking, for trail running in the winter, for hiking in the winter. We don't groom all of our trails, but we do groom a lot of them, and it's really created an outlet for people during COVID and during the wintertime to access our trails. And another part that we're really proud of with our club is that we also have our GIS program that we have. One of our board members is at state, and we're lucky to have him, and he's sort of we've mapped our entire network, and we also have a trail maintenance app that we use. So at the beginning of the season, we'll have volunteers and our trail crew go out and check out all the trails. They'll map out what maintenance points need to be repaired, and then that all gets fed into the database, and then that makes our strategic plan for the summer for maintenance. And as well, we can let our landowners know what's happening on their trails, on their land, and keep everyone up to date and informed. So we're very proud of this. We're starting to share it with other local organizations and hoping that we can be a leader in this area. Some of our other successes, again, that wage subsidy grant from the Columbia Basin Trust, we're very thankful for that. To have that, they're slowly weaning us off that. It started out with 5, then 4, now we're down to 3, but we're still really appreciative. So we're hoping that we can find some more stable funding to keep that going, because as much as volunteers are amazing, it's so great to have a paid trail crew that we know that are out there working hard and maintaining our incredible network. Last year, we did a huge project on Hikos and Mount Proctor. Again, using volunteers and our trail crew, we refurbished the whole trail because it was badly damaged during the atmospheric river storm of 2021. We also did a collaborative project with Rex and Sites BC, Tourism Fernie to redo a new trail to access Fairy Creek. So we're very proud of this trail. We also had a great project, more flow trail, kind of Vailmonte style, machine built trail. So we have a couple of those in Fernie, and we're hoping to expand on those more. Super lucky to have Canwell as one of our landowners who they're willing to work with us and very supportive. Again, lots of work to be done this summer, coming up on the still damage from the 2021 floods. We have a huge project that we're taking place on the Trans-Canada Trail. This is a section of the trail that we manage that's over 30 kilometers and goes through not only private land, but also city land. And so we've worked with our partners again to make this project happen and get this trail connecting the valley again from Sparwood back to Morrissey. We're also manage the dirt jump park on behalf of the city of Fernie. So we have a bunch of projects that are taking place there this summer, which we're very excited about. It's sort of a hub in our community and everyone hangs out there. So we're really excited. And then we have a big project that's coming up. We're working with all the different stakeholders. So this is where it's really important to be an alliance and discuss with all of your user groups what's coming down and what projects you have in mind, because this not only affects our private landowners, but there's also different user groups like the Rod and Gun Club and our Elk Valley Dirt Riders Association, where we can collaborate and work together to provide a trail that's accessible for all and in all seasons. So we really are thankful for the grants that we received, that we're able to take part in these projects and wildlife studies and all the things that we're able to accomplish through the Columbia Basin Trust. And yeah, for any clubs that are starting a trail alliance, like it's really important. It's not a short-term thing. It's a long-term game, and just make sure that you're bringing all the stakeholders to the table and approaching them and collaborating with them and communicating with them. And yeah, working all together is really important. So thank you for the time, for letting me share what the Fernie Trail Alliance is all about.
Thanks, Melanie. Lots of lessons learned for you, just in the last, you've only been with the Fernie Trail Alliance for the past year and a little bit more. So it sounds like you've learned a lot. So thanks for sharing that. So that kind of rounds out this little round of introduction that we're going to do. So I've got a couple of questions, and then I can see that Liz from the Federation of Mountain Clubs and the Vancouver Island Trail Association has posted some questions as well. So we'll just try and get into the flesh of a few of these questions, and then as I mentioned, yeah, feel free to post your questions. We'll get to those in a moment. I mean, there's so many questions that I could ask, but I would like to ask one that actually I think one of you were proposing. What partnerships or collaborations have been, very effective in supporting your trail and recreation initiatives, and how did you establish these relationships? So I'd love to hear from any of you. I'm not sure who wants to go first. Maybe Jen, maybe Lance, since he lands on
I
himself.
can go first.
Yeah, please.
One is the biggest thing is being open on upfront with everybody, making sure that everybody's included and feels included. If you exclude one group, it very fastly grows to the others no longer have the trust. The other thing is we've built Tabor Mountain has a very good rapport with Rec Sites and Trails BC officers in Prince George here, to the point that a lot of times now they will come to Tabor Mountain and say, can you do this for us? Can you do that for us? So and proving that we can do it to them and to their satisfaction is a great alliance that gets them on your side.
Thanks, Lance. Do any of you, Melanie, Jen, anybody? Oh, Terese, do you
It
want to
just exactly. Sorry, go ahead, Terese.
Melanie?
All right. I think for us again, you know, Trora is very new in the baby steps compared to a lot of you out there. I think the reason we've actually got up and running and successful from the get set, and success, I mean, we're up and running, is that it was a community-led initiative, but they came to the district and the ECDEV team to help drive and facilitate it. So I think that, again, when we talk about volunteer burnout and trying to do things where, you know, the volunteers, their core business may not necessarily be business and fundraising and all of those things that we do half of the course in the office, their passion is in creating the trails and creating the tourism. So they came to us to partner with them to get it up and running, and we've been doing a lot of the driving and facilitating. And once that ED is in place, then we'll be able to go back to our role of supporting rather than driving. So that relationship with your local government, because I'm the only local government here in the panel, I think was important for us here in Tumbler.
Thank you. Melanie, do you want to go next?
Yeah, just reiterating sort of what Lance and Terese and Jen has already said, is just creating those partnerships and making sure that you're bringing everybody to the table and working together, and whatever future plans you have, you're sharing those with them, because some of the plans that you're making could affect their use of trails. So you want to make sure that you're including everybody and bringing everybody to the table, and lots of strategic sessions and planning and vision boards and all those kinds of things are super important when you're creating these alliances.
Jen, do you want to? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, for sure. One of the biggest partnerships that, I won't say one is more important than the other, but that has definitely played a huge role is our relationships with the Indigenous communities in our region. So we have 4 Secwepemc communities or bands that are within the Shuswap where we directly work. And kind of the part 2 of the question, I think that you would ask, that it's been skipped a little bit, is how do you establish these relationships and how do you nurture them? And it's just to keep showing up. So I've been the executive director of the STA for just over 2 years, and my predecessor thankfully had started the relationships, but as a new person coming in, I had to foster and develop those relationships myself. And I've found that just by being genuine and continuing to show up and be open has gone so far for these relationships, and making it easier for us to get our work that we've set to do, and just to be able to work with the other organizations and groups.
Thanks, Jen. My next question, which might be the last one, maybe. What are some of the most effective strategies for gaining support from decision makers in the broader community for trail and recreation initiatives? Who wants to go first? Do you want to go first, Jen? You unmuted. Somebody else can go first.
I'm happy to go. I think one of the crucial things for that is just showing that you can do the work, that you're organized, that you have the capacity to manage the trails that you have in a good way and in a responsible way. And then when you're going to do those asks, that they have the trust and the belief in you that, you know, you can either expand your network or you reduce the size to get something new. There's always sort of pull and give on all these things, but I just really think that showing that you have a plan and that you're able to manage what you have first really well before you expand or do anything else.
My mouse is having a spaz attack here. For us, one of the other things is to continue to show up and to recognize that there's sometimes processes in place that take a lot longer than we would want it to be or to expect it to be. And that just because we've decided that we're going to build a trail somewhere or do trail maintenance doesn't mean that we're going to be able to do it tomorrow, and that it takes time to build the relationships to earn the trust of the different land managers. And recognizing that the process just might take longer. And we've made the conscious determination not to be a lobby group. So, you know, there is a small part of what we do is advocacy, but we've taken the approach of not lobbying. And I think that has done really well for us as well, because it's allowed us to work with a wider range of people than we might have been able to if we had kind of stuck ourselves within that.
Terese?
Thank you. I think one of the most effective strategies, and it's one that's probably a future ask, it was discussed at the latest BC Economic Development Association Summit in Penticton. So Kevin Pennock from CORE always talks about the value of providing data and metrics that illustrates the impact, the economic impact of how this is going to impact your region or your community, the makers, the industry, the manufacturers. And I think when we gather that information and that data, which is going to be a long time in the making, and I know that he's plugged into quite a lot of the American groups and working on that, having those demonstrating the value of outdoor recreation, particularly the outdoor rec economy, I think is going to be important for us to keep moving, these initiatives ahead. There's obviously all the benefits to the community and the health benefits and just the impact of outdoor rec initiatives, making sure that we demonstrate the positive effects and not the negative effects. But I'm a big fan of chasing that data and those metrics. So hopefully Kevin keeps leading the charge on that.
We'll find a way to invite Kevin and his team to one of our upcoming webinars. Yeah, they sure are fascinating people. So that's Kevin Pennock from the Kootenay Outdoor Recreation Enterprise based in Kimberley. So anybody else? Otherwise, I do have another question that I would like to ask. So Lance, go ahead.
Basically, just reiterate what the other panelists have said, that you got to build trust with the people. You got to listen to what they have to say. If you're not going to listen to them or act on what you say you're going to do, there's going to be no trust and you'll get nowhere. That's, basically same as all three other panelists have said.
Yeah, we have heard that a few times. So that must be true. Yeah, building trust, delivering, showing the impact. The last question that I'll maybe just quickly ask you before we take questions from the floor is, just very quickly, each of you, like any advice that you want to give to organizations that are kind of listening in and who are thinking about starting up their own alliance. Any, little tidbits of advice.
So for us, it's relationships. Relationships are key, and it's just recognizing that you never know who you're going to end up working with down the road. Treating everybody with respect. The Shuswap Trail Alliance likes to start from values, and so we get everyone in a room, and we found that if you can start for what gets you, like why everybody's going to the mountain for the same reason, whether you're going on bike, whether you're on horse, whether you're on feet, it's for that same connection to nature. So if you can start with what those values are and how you're alike, it makes it a lot harder to work through any of the issues that may come out from where you're different, and to just reset yourself back to those values and that grounding and those relationships.
Terese?
I would say, and again, relative to us, start small and build momentum over time. Focus on developing a strong core or group of committed individuals who share your passion for the outdoor recreation and are willing to invest time and resources into building a sustainable alliance. So that's definitely where TRAW has started from, a small core firebrand starter group.
Thanks. Everyone sort of covered everything, but yeah, the relationships, the values, all those things are super important, but it takes time, a long time to make these connections. And, if you're starting a trail alliance now and you're expecting, by June, you're going to be together and everything's going to be great. It's not, it's going to take, years. You have to be in it for the long game, and really just create those relationships and have good communication and follow through on what you said, that you were going to do in the beginning.
I agree with everything that's already been said. Louise, that's just the one other thing that I would add to it. And that is when you get your contractors or volunteers out there working on your trails or doing whatever they're doing, the same goes for them. They need respect. You need to build trust with them so that if something does come up, offhand that I can go to a contractor and say, this is what I need done. And I can trust that he knows what I'm going to want and he will give us what we want.
Thanks, Lance. So, okay, well, thank you so much for answering my questions there. Let's move to questions from the audience here. We've got one here from a couple of questions from Liz from the Vancouver Island Trail Association. Her first question is, she's interested in knowing more about how your relationships, with Indigenous nations. Any advice on how to create good and strong relationships?
Show up and keep showing up and keep showing up and keep showing up and just be genuine. If there is an event that is being held by one of the communities and it's open to the public, attend it. If there is a powwow or music or they've got anything that's open, just keep showing up. And sometimes it takes longer than it's just with all people, right? It's the relationships. But I have found by showing up and being genuine and acknowledging I'm a human and will make mistakes because that's what humans do. But being open and just continually showing up, that's been huge for us. And some of them have taken me 2 years to just kind of crack in with the relationships now. And I just kept showing up.
Thanks, Jen. Anybody else who has got some experiences that they want to share?
We're just starting to create relationships with the Ktunaxa. We haven't in the past done that, just volunteer organization, just focused on the ground and not actually with the relationships with the Ktunaxa. So we are working hard to create a relationship with them and reaching out to the Tobacco Plains Band, Akam, and I'm hoping in the future that we can be as good as Jen and have those relationships established. But like you said, Jen, just keep showing up. So I'm hoping that's what we're going to keep doing. So.
Thanks, Melanie. Is it okay if I move to the next question? We do have a few here from Liz, but I think they'll take quite a bit of time. And I think maybe they mostly that's one about private land agreements. Maybe I could just ask Melanie to kind of email Liz afterwards, if you don't mind, because I think you probably, maybe Jen too. There's one here from Judith. If I was involved with Table Mountain, relationships between the different groups began with the LRMP planning in the 90s. We found motorized, non-motorized groups had more to gain working together rather than fighting. And that really spilled over to the TMRS and continues as Lance said. So that was just a statement. So that's good to know. It was not a question. Karina Young is asking, when you're working with multiple stakeholders, how do you manage training and liability? If you want to answer that.
We have what do you mean by training? Just sort of discussing what work is going to be done on the trails, or is that what they mean?
Yeah, maybe Karina, if you're still listening to this, maybe you can just clarify.
As far as liability, though, that section of the question, we have liability insurance that covers all of our landowners. That's part of our land use agreement to have it, and we share it with them and add them as an additional insured on our policy every year.
Thank you, Melanie. So got one here from Sarah from Horse Council BC. If the questions aren't already part of your Trail Alliance, has there been any barriers to including equestrians? Maybe that was because none of you mentioned equestrians. Lance?
Say that again, Louise. Sorry.
If equestrians like horse riding groups are not part of your Trail Alliance, has there been any barriers to including equestrians as one of the groups that are part of your alliance?
Backwoods Horsemen are a member of TMRS, and they are actually Hickory Wing, which I said earlier had started in 1959. It just folded as a club here recently. And the Prince George, well, I guess I call it the Prince George. Sandra would probably correct me, but the Prince George Backwoods Horsemen are taking over some of the maintenance of those trails that Hickory Wing was doing in the past. So no, they're definitely a part of it. As I said, if motorized meets horses, motorized stops, let the horses go by. Usually, if it's me, we usually have a pretty good discussion and we carry on.
Sounds good, Lance. Jen, Melanie, Terese.
We have we work with the backcountry horsemen quite a bit. We're partnering with them on some projects, and quite a few of our networks are multi-use and do have equestrian trails. And some of our busier networks, some of the trails are dedicated just equestrian or just mountain bike. Of course, hikers being educated to be responsible and to be careful whether they're using the equestrian or the mountain bike trails. But we definitely have quite a few kilometers of equestrian trails in our networks.
Yeah, we just, the horseback club is not part of the big four. They don't have as big a presence here as the others. Certainly working well with, we will work well with them in the future. There's, we're blessed to have a lot of space out here, so we're not fighting for sharing as much as everybody else. But the intent going into the future with our strategies is to work with everybody and include everybody.
Thank you. Melanie, do you have equestrian groups represented as part of the Fernie Trail
We
Alliance?
don't have, but we have some equestrian users that use the Elk Rim Trail that's over near Pukanusa. They're able to ride on those trails, but we don't have horses on our trail network. There's like Terese said, we've got a lot of space, and most of the horseback riders they'll go further out than the actual trail network to go ride their horses.
Okay, sounds good. So it looks like we've just got like one question here, and then yeah, any of you are welcome to kind of bring some, anything up that you want to mention too. But it's from Richie. One thing we hear from our local tourism organizations is the need for us to all adopt a consistent software app and common standards for signage, and difficulty for hiking trails. Mountain bikers have done this with Trailfox, but hiking trails are all over the map. Are you panelists hearing the same thing?
I'm not sure about the rest of the organizations, but we follow the Rex Insights BC has put out a trail matrix rating standard, and that's it's in draft form still. It's not the final version, but we're adopting that as our trail rating matrix, and that's what we're using across all our network to rate our trails.
Okay. Jen?
I'm sorry. I think the battery in my mouse is dying. It's on its last legs of cooperation. Just when it's the most embarrassing. We are also following the Rec Sites and Trails standards. And I think that you will see more and more of that brought in consistently across the province. I think where it may have been voluntary at times. I can't speak for Rec Sites and Trails, but I wouldn't be surprised if it comes down not in the not so far off distant future that is what is. And they're asking for. As for the software, I mean, we have our own website, but we still find that people are using Trailforks or All Trails or finding the information where they can. And I think it would be a huge undertaking to get across all of the different groups using the same software.
Thanks, Jen. So do any of you, because actually we've kind of run out of questions here, which is fine, but Melanie, Lance, Terese, or Jen, do you have any sort of like last bits of advice or anything you want to kind of share with our audience here? Terese?
I'll jump in there, Louise. There was one other question there from an anonymous attendee. And the question is, I'm with a community destination marketing organization. Do you have advice for encouraging interest in collaboration and alliances? We have a lot of groups, but not a lot of interest in working together. And I feel that kind of was probably Trora or Tumbler Ridge prior to the last year. There was a lot of activity and and people doing things, but nobody had really thought about working together. So really my advice for that is if you can find a big enough common vision and strategy to pull everybody along together with you, I think that would be where I would start is, pick out the most passionate and get that person on side. Then we got a second club on side, and those two together then brought the other two in. So it wasn't, I don't know how we would have fared if we'd started off with a big town hall and had everybody in there together. We went one by one and sort of pulled them into the fold. And then when we shared the vision and made it work for every club, so there wasn't room for people to go, no, this isn't going to work. So whoever that was, more than happy for you to contact me. if you want to hear more about Traw and how we got going, be happy to take it offline and have a bigger chat about it.
Melanie, oh, Jen, do you want to?
Yeah, I think it's the same thing. You really need a couple of key champions that are willing to continually show up and bring it to the larger group and start threading the needle and pulling the relationships in. And you know, it's like Terese said, it's a couple people at a time. I don't think you can do that overwhelming big town hall, but just having the key champions, those couple of people that are willing to stick it through and reach out and start threading the needle between the different groups.
Lance and Melanie, do you want to answer that question?
I don't really have an answer for the question, but what I do know that I'm seeing here in Prince George, and I don't know, probably other clubs are seeing as well, I hear via the grapevine, but a lot of the volunteers, myself, are senior citizens, and there doesn't seem to be the younger generation getting out there to volunteer. How are other associations finding that same thing, or?
No,
Melanie, is that, sorry, Terese, yeah?
we've got a real big cross section. You know, we encourage newcomers to town to join volunteer clubs. It's part of our sort of social fabric where people get out and mix with everybody. And I've been on worker bees with all ages. So yeah, we're pretty blessed here. We've got a good mix across the board.
Yeah, we're in the same boat as today's. We've got, you know, all sorts of different varieties of individuals that come out, depending on what their passion is, whether it's, you know, trail running or hiking or biking or the dirt jumps. You know, we get people working on all the trails at our weekly trail nights.
Okay, good. Oh, Jen, I'll let you answer.
One of our most popular networks, we've actually had to split it into a series of volunteer days because last year we had our big volunteer day and too many people showed up. We had more people than we had tools and the capability to organize them. So this year we've done an equestrian day, we're doing a mountain bike day, we're doing a hiker day. We have a mountain bike academy in town, and the youth from there will come out and spend a couple of days in the network as well. And we actually have a youth engagement committee on our board now, and they are making a very conscious effort to engage and reach out to youth, recognizing that there may be a bit of a gap. We held a trail camp this year for grades 7 through 12, and the hopes of it is getting them interested in how to work on the trails, and that if we can get them hired as high school students, even for 1 or 2 years into their 10 years of university, it's better for the organization, and it gets the message out to young people that may not understand what goes into making the trails.
Well, that's great. Yeah, I would love to dig into that a little bit more at maybe a future webinar, but just like how we get youth involved. You know, just what are some of the initiatives that recreation groups around across BC are using? So there was one question here from Liz, and I think maybe Terese is answering that, but she's just wondering about the annual budget of your organizations. How much money does it take to kind of run, you know, a trail or a recreation alliance? Lance, what about Tabor Mountain? What's your annual budget?
Tabor Mountain Rec Society does not have an annual budget. Basically, it's all the member clubs that have their annual budgets. They decide what work they want to do. We're just the connection between them and Rec Sites and Trails BC. So our annual budget's very, very small.
I think Jen already kind of shared hers. Melanie, what about yours? Forget if you share that as part.
Yeah, we're at about somewhere between $300,000 and $400,000 a year. This is the first year that they've had a paid executive director position, so we have that funding for the next 2 years. I guess, I don't know, Jen, probably you and Terese have the same struggle as me. You can apply for grants from the Columbia Basin Trust and from different organizations, and they'll give you the funding to do the actual trail work, but not for the operational costs. So it's really hard to get unrestricted funding. We just had our Columbia Basin Trust open house last week, and there was a loud voice for most of the nonprofits in the room that were pushing for unrestricted funding, because that's what's hard. I mean, we can get all the money to do the projects, but you need the people to manage them and to make them happen, and that's the hardest part, I think. So now it's just sort of reaching out to private donors or corporations and trying to see if they will also give unrestricted funding. But I think that's for most trail organizations, that's the biggest struggle, is just unrestricted funds.
I think we'll, our starting for the first year is just to have that one FTE and then get a website up and running. So, minimally, we're looking at 200,000, which we're just about at. Part of the plan or the strategy that we'd like to put together will include business units. So how are we going to fund the association from the inside? Is that running more events, running the summer markets, just finding ways to create money on income within the association that's not reliant on sponsorship donors or funding. So I've worked in previous organizations like Chambers of Commerce where they very successfully funded themselves from within. So chasing that model, we'll let you know how we go.
Thank you. I think we are kind of running out of time here, so I think we need to stop. People's lunch breaks are over. So thank you all. Thank you, panelists, for joining this webinar and kind of sharing your experiences, what you have learned, advice for other groups. And feel free to, if there's a question that we didn't answer, feel free to email me and I'll make sure to kind of pass it on to our four panelists here. The next webinar that is coming up, we haven't announced it yet, is on June 16th from 1 to 2. We're bringing in a few people from the Ministry of Forest. They're going to talk to us about forest landscape planning and changes to the Forest and Range Practices Act, and how recreation groups can participate, how can we as recreation groups participate in these planning process, the forest landscape planning process. That's something that has been that I've been requesting for a long time. So I'm glad that there is an opportunity to hear more about that. So we'll make sure to, if you subscribe to our newsletter, if you're a member, you'll hear about that automatically. The other thing is BC Trails Day, June 3rd. I hope you're all participating. Thanks, Terese. Les, great. Melanie, Jen, that's awesome. We're hoping to see as many events out in BC as possible, and we do have a little bit of funding available for events. So there's lots of information on our website, orcbc.ca/BC Trails Day. So there's an application if you would like to apply for a little bit of funding. That's up to $500 to host your events. And the deadline is, I think it's in a week or maybe 10 days. Yeah, I think that's all. So thank you all for coming. And I don't think I made this clear, but we did record this webinar, so I'll make sure to kind of send the webinar recording to everybody within the next day or so. So thank you. Have a nice rest of your day, and I hope to see you all again soon.
Thank you to the ORC and yourself, Louise, for making this all available for everybody. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Louise. Thank you all, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. See you.
Jen, Teresa, bye-bye.
Bye, thank you.